A billionaire tried to sell his own baby girl, but a silent witness on four legs had other plans. What the horse did next uncovered a family's darkest secrets, and brought justice galloping back. The rain lashed against the tall, glistening windows of the penthouse overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Inside, the air was cold not from the weather, but from the man who stood near the cradle, his expression void of remorse. Sterling Harrow wasn't just wealthy, he was power incarnate. Real estate mogul, luxury hotel tycoon, a man whose name made people stand straighter and speak softer. But tonight, his gaze held none of the pride most fathers would feel looking down at their newborn daughter. "She's not what I wanted," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "Useless. Weak. A girl." The baby whimpered, her tiny fists curling as if grasping at the air for mercy. But there was none in that room. From the barn below, across the estate's vast lawn, a horse named Valor lifted his head. He was a sleek black stallion, a majestic creature gifted to Harrow by a Saudi prince after a billion-dollar deal. But unlike most horses bred for vanity and paraded for guests, Valor had a quiet soul and sharp eyes. And that night, he saw everything. Sterling's decision was made within hours. Under the veil of midnight, with his trusted fixer, an ex-military driver named Coulson, he loaded the infant into a silent black vehicle. No baby bag. No birth certificate. Just cash, instructions, and a destination that stunk of despair, a remote deal with a couple known for adoptions that weren't really adoptions at all. Coulson, hardened by years of shadowy tasks, hesitated only once. "She's just a baby, sir." Sterling's voice caught like frost. "She's an expense. An error. Do your job." They didn't realize Valor had escaped the barn that night. Nor did they realize that the stallion was galloping silently, like an omen, through the shadows along the hedges and back roads. Following. Watching. Waiting. The handoff was meant to happen near a truck stop upstate. Coulson waited in the back seat while Sterling met with the buyers, a wiry man and a woman with cracked nails and greedy eyes. The baby girl, wrapped in a cheap blanket, let out a soft coo. The sound, instead of stirring compassion, made the couple glance at each other with irritation. The transaction began. Cash for flesh. Silence for survival. That was when Valor struck. No one knew how he found them so fast. But out of the fog and headlights, the stallion came like a demon of judgment, rearing, kicking, smashing Sterling's luxury SUV with enough force to dent the door and set off the alarm. The couple screamed and ran. Coulson pulled out a pistol, but Valor was gone before a shot could be fired, dragging something in his teeth. The baby. The stallion had taken the child. The news went wild. "Mystery stallion saves baby from human traffickers." The story broke across tabloids and even hit international outlets. But Valor had vanished into the forested edges of the state. For 3 days, helicopters scanned the woods. Drones flew overhead. And somehow, the baby survived. They found her on the third morning, nestled in an old hay shed near a closed summer camp. A trail of hoofprints led in and out. She was dehydrated but alive. No wild animal had touched her. No signs of violence. Only the imprint of hooves in a protective circle around the makeshift bed of hay. They called her Hope. And hope became a symbol. What the public didn't know, what even law enforcement failed to uncover, was that Sterling Harrow had orchestrated the entire thing. He spun the press story to paint himself as the heroic father whose child had been kidnapped by traffickers, saved only by a miraculous horse. He was interviewed. Honored. Praised. But Valor did not return to the estate. He watched from afar. And someone else watched, too. A young stable hand named June, who had worked quietly at Harrow Manor for years, cleaning stalls, tending grounds, forgotten like a piece of furniture. She had seen how Sterling treated people. She had seen how he never visited his dying wife in her final months. And she saw how Valor behaved around him, tense, watchful, protective. And now, June held a secret. The security footage. The deleted GPS logs. The lies in Sterling's tearful TV appearances. She didn't know what she'd do with it yet. But she knew this: Valor wasn't just a horse. And the baby wasn't just lucky. They were both survivors of something darker. And the world would soon find out why. 3 months passed. The nation had moved on. Stories fade, even miracles grow old. But for June, the stable hand, every day since that night had felt like walking on the edge of a knife. She still worked at Harrow Manor, though no longer with a quiet mind. In the dead of night, she'd replay the footage she managed to save, a grainy clip from a backup security camera showing Sterling Harrow loading a baby into the back seat, speaking to Coulson in hushed, cold tones. His lips clearly mouthed the words, "No witnesses." June hadn't shown anyone. Yet. Valor had not returned to the estate. Some said he ran off into the Adirondacks. Others claimed he died. But June knew better. Every now and then, when she walked the outer paddocks, she'd find fresh hoofprints. Big ones. Deep ones. Watching prints. And sometimes, a shadow in the trees. Meanwhile, Baby Hope had become something of a media darling. Rescued. Recovered. Photographed in the arms of smiling nurses at a children's shelter. The public assumed she would soon be adopted by a loving family. But the reality was harsher. Sterling had generously offered to support the shelter with a 6-figure donation, on the condition that they delay the adoption process. He claimed he needed time to grieve and determine custody rights. In truth, he feared that once Hope went to another home, she might grow up and remember something. Her face was a reminder. Her existence, a liability. June knew she had to do something. But Sterling wasn't just rich, he was protected. Police, lawyers, even local politicians owed him favors. So, she reached out to the only person who might care enough to help. Elias Rowe, a former investigative journalist turned podcast host. Once a Pulitzer-winning reporter, Elias had been disgraced years ago after exposing a child trafficking ring linked to corporate elites, and losing the court case on a technicality. Since then, he'd run a small but fiercely loyal online following, reporting the stories no one dared touch. June sent him a burner email. With footage. In 3 words, he sold her. Elias arrived in town under a different name in an old van that smelled of cigarettes and regret. But his eyes were sharp. He met June in a diner on Route 32. She looked terrified. "He'll destroy you if he finds out," she whispered. "He's already destroyed others," Elias replied, voice low. "Let's not add another." They talked for hours. June shared everything, her memories of Sterling's wife, Lillian, who'd withered away in silence. The rumors that she hadn't died from illness but disappeared after threatening to go public with secrets. June had overheard it all, how Lillian begged Sterling to love their daughter, how he called her a defect before the baby was even born. He said Hope had something wrong with her brain, June said, eyes glassy. She wasn't even tested. He just decided. Elias took notes. Then he asked the one question June had avoided. "Why didn't you go to the police?" She hesitated. Then slowly slid over a folded envelope. Inside were 6 Polaroid photos. Taken from an old stable camera. One of them showed a man, Coulson, holding a silenced gun to a different stable hand's head. The next image showed a shovel. A shallow grave. A small wooden cross. The stable hand had tried to report a previous incident. He never got the chance. That night, Elias left the diner and drove to the woods. He didn't tell June. Didn't say a word. But he went looking for the horse. And somehow, the horse found him first. It began with the flick of a tail in the distance. Then hoofbeats. Then suddenly, Valor was in front of him, massive and still, black as midnight and moonlight. Elias stood frozen. Then he whispered, "You're the one who saved her." Valor didn't move. But as Elias stepped closer, the stallion turned and began to walk. Deeper into the woods. Elias followed. through tangled underbrush and forgotten trails, until they reached a clearing. There, hidden beneath a collapsed hunting cabin, was something Elias didn't expect. A lockbox. Dirt-streaked. Buried under old leaves and brambles. Inside, a faded photograph. Sterling, younger, with a different woman, not Lillian. Notes. Names. A key card from a hotel Sterling once denied ever visiting. Birth certificates. 2 of them. One for Hope. The other. Elias stared. Another child. A boy. Same last name. Gabriel Harrow, the certificate read. Date of birth, 2002. Date of death, blank. Elias's blood turned to ice. Back at the estate, Sterling Harrow was growing uneasy. He had noticed the eyes. The whispers. He ordered Coulson to search the staff's devices. Threatened firings. Sent private investigators to follow June. And most of all, he demanded the shelter transfer custody of Hope to him immediately. He planned to send her abroad. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere final. But June had one more move. She uploaded the footage to Elias. Elias uploaded it to the world. Not to the press. But to every social media platform at once. With voiceover. With timestamps. With a story that cracked the internet open like thunder. This is not a conspiracy. This is what happens when the powerful believe they are untouchable. But one horse, and one woman who refused to stay silent, made the truth run faster than lies. The video went viral in 24 hours. Police were forced to respond. Protesters gathered outside Harrow Manor. The governor called for a special investigation. And Sterling Harrow vanished. Disappeared into the wind, just like his money. But valor remained. Standing tall outside the shelter the next morning, when June brought Hope out for her morning walk. And for the first time, the baby giggled, reaching for the horse's mane. As if she remembered. And June wept. Not because of the terror they had faced. But because of the justice that had finally begun. The morning after the video went viral, Valor stood silent by the shelter gates as if guarding something sacred. Inside, Hope slept in a blanket that smelled faintly of straw and lavender, a faint smile on her tiny lips. June sat beside her, still stunned by the storm she and Elias had unleashed. The media was in chaos. Reporters camped outside the shelter. Online forums flooded with theories. Protesters demanded arrests. And yet, Sterling Harrow remained invisible. Until the letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a single sheet, typed in courier font. She was never supposed to live. But now that she has, you must know everything. Attached, a flash drive. Elias reviewed it in his motel room, curtains drawn, gun on the nightstand. When he clicked play, the grainy video showed a dimly lit hospital room. A younger Lillian Harrow sat on the bed, pale and frightened. Next to her, a nurse whispered, "You have a choice, ma'am. The scan shows, high risk. Severe neurodivergence. Your husband already signed the waiver." Lillian's voice trembled, "I don't care. I want her." The screen cut to black. Then a second video began. A home recording. Sterling shouting at Lillian in a marble-floored hallway. "You're going to ruin everything. That child will cost us more than you understand." Lillian screamed back, "She's your daughter. You already got rid of the first one." Sterling's voice dropped, dark as tar, "Don't ever say that name again." The camera shifted. A small boy, maybe 10, stood on the stairs, listening. His face frozen in horror. Gabriel. Elias nearly dropped the laptop. So it was true. There had been another child. A boy. The firstborn son. Gone, erased from every public record. But why? June dug through what little she had from Lillian's belongings, an old jewelry box, saved out of sentimentality. Tucked beneath the lining, they found a weathered note in Lillian's handwriting. Gabriel was different. Like Hope. And Sterling couldn't stand it. I think he did something to him. If I disappear, please find my son. The final piece fell into place like thunder. Sterling hadn't just tried to sell his daughter. He had disposed of his own son years before. And buried the truth under money and reputation. Elias and June went public again. This time, with the recordings. The medical files. The full story. And that's when the twist came. From the shadows of the comments section, a message appeared. My name is Gabriel. And I'm not dead. The man behind the message was 23 years old. Living under a false name in a small town in Vermont. A quiet life. No social media. No friends. Just horses. Gabriel had survived. But barely. He had been institutionalized at 11 after a mysterious incident at Harrow Manor, labeled violent, disturbed, and unfit for mainstream education. Records showed Sterling signed over guardianship to a private psychiatric facility. But 2 years later, the place burned down in a suspicious fire. Half the patients died. Gabriel didn't. He escaped. With help. From a caretaker who had since passed away, but who told him before dying, "You were never crazy. You were just inconvenient." Gabriel had stayed hidden ever since. Until now. When Elias and June found him, he was working at a rescue ranch for abandoned animals. And Valor was there, too. The stallion had found him. Long before any of this began. I didn't know what he meant when he showed up at the fence, Gabriel said softly. But I felt safe. Like I wasn't alone anymore. He walked with a limp. Stuttered sometimes. But his mind, his heart, were sharp. He remembered everything. His mother's cries. His father's cruelty. And the promise he made to himself, if I ever get free, I'll find her. I'll find my sister. Now, he had. When Gabriel met Hope for the first time, she was in June's arms. She stared at him, wide-eyed, curious. And then she reached out. Touching his face gently. As if some unspoken bond clicked into place. Gabriel cried. So did June. So did Elias. Because this wasn't just about exposing a villain anymore. It was about restoring a family that had been torn apart by arrogance, fear, and greed. But Sterling wasn't finished. 1 week after the second wave of revelations, a fire tore through the shelter. Hope was safe, thanks to Valor, who kicked down a door and led June and the baby through a smoke-filled hallway. But files were lost. Witnesses were silenced. And Coulson, the fixer, was found dead in a hotel room with a staged suicide note. Sterling was tying up loose ends. Or so he thought. Because Elias had already made backup copies. And the world was watching. More than that, they were angry. The Attorney General called for Sterling's arrest. Interpol issued a warrant. Private investigators traced flight records to offshore islands. But Sterling wasn't hiding abroad. He was right here. In the woods. Returning to the only place he thought no one would look. The cabin where Gabriel had once been sent away. And where Valor was waiting. Sterling Harrow stood in the clearing, his suit rumpled, mud caked onto his Italian loafers, his breath uneven. He had aged 10 years and 3 months. No security detail. No entourage. Just a silver revolver at his side and eyes that had lost the smug sharpness they once carried. He wasn't there to surrender. He was there to bury the last piece of the past that haunted him. But he wasn't alone. Valor was already in the clearing, unmoving, proud, and silent. When Sterling stepped forward, the horse took a slow, deliberate pace toward him. No fear. No flinch. As if staring directly into the rot of everything this man had done. You again, Sterling hissed, his voice cracking. You ruined everything. Valor simply stared. And in that moment, Sterling trembled, not from fear, but from recognition. He remembered this horse. Not just from the night at the truck stop, but years earlier. When Lillian first brought Gabriel to the stables as a child. Gabriel had only smiled for two things in this world, his mother, and that horse. "You always loved him more than me," Sterling muttered, eyes darting toward the old, rotting cabin behind the trees. Everyone did. From the trees behind him, a branch cracked. Gabriel stepped forward. Not hiding. Not running. Just standing, tall, damaged, but defiant. Behind him came June, carrying Hope in her arms. And beside her was Elias, camera on, broadcasting live. No backup. Just truth. "You're surrounded by your ghosts, Sterling," Elias called out. "You came here to erase them. But it's too late." Sterling raised the gun. Not at them, at himself. "I built an empire," he growled. "I shaped skylines. And now? I'm hunted by a horse and two broken children." Gabriel stepped forward, his voice low but steady. "We're not broken. You are." Sterling laughed, the sound hollow. "You think exposing me will change anything? Money always wins." "Not this time," June replied. "Because people saw. And they believed." Sterling looked at his daughter in June's arms. Tiny, calm, watching him, not with fear, but curiosity. And for 1 second, something cracked inside him. Not regret. But recognition. "She looks like Lillian." His hand trembled. But Valor moved first. A single stomp. Loud. Firm. Sterling flinched, lost grip, and the gun fell. Seconds later, police sirens broke through the woods. Sterling Harrow collapsed to his knees, surrounded by the ghosts he had created, and the lives he had failed to destroy. Months later, Harrow was tried on multiple charges: attempted child trafficking, conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice, and more. Elias's footage, June's testimony, and Gabriel's haunting revelations painted a picture no defense attorney could whitewash. Sterling was sentenced to life in federal prison without parole. But for Gabriel, June, and Hope, the journey was only beginning. They didn't return to the city. They stayed in Vermont, at the rescue ranch. A quiet life. Hope learned to walk by holding Valor's mane. She spoke her first word beside Gabriel, brother. June legally adopted her, with Gabriel as her co-guardian. Elias published a book titled The Horse That Saw Everything, which became a bestseller, not for its scandal, but for its hope. And one evening, under a golden sky, Gabriel knelt by Valor, tears in his eyes. "You didn't just save her," he whispered. "You saved all of us." Valor blinked slowly, then pressed his forehead gently to Gabriel's. In a world obsessed with power, speed, and silence, it was a simple horse, a creature of instinct and loyalty, that brought a monstrous man to justice. And it was the unseen, the discarded, the children no one believed in, who rebuilt a family from the ashes. If this story reached you, remember, truth might gallop quietly, but it never runs alone. There is always someone watching. And sometimes, it has 4 legs and a heart that remembers. If this story moved you, consider supporting your local animal rescues and child advocacy organizations. One voice, one act, can turn a tragedy into a triumph. And never underestimate the soul of a creature who saw everything, and chose to act.